As easy as that, right? Good evening, all. Welcome. It's nice to see such a big group here. And I know we have I want to welcome also those families who are coming in on the stream. So for those who are here tonight, it's also being streamed, recorded, and the recording will be sent out to you probably in next week's prep in a minute, but we'll get it out to you. So there's a PowerPoint presentation, and we have a guest speaker here tonight as well. So a couple of thoughts before we start. First of all, good evening and welcome. A few introductions. First of all, we have with us Mr. Corry Unis. If we can get a quick wave here, you'll hear more about him and from him later. And we have with us Mrs. Laura Silence, Rick Hutchinson. Peter Francini is actually coming back from ski practice, so we hope to see him soon. He might ski right in here. We'll see what happens there. And joining us also tonight are Mr. Tim Dee, our principal, and Mrs. Jessica Lombardi. So we're going to start off with, by the way, Jess is class dean for your son's class 2025. So we're going to start off with a few words from Tim Dee, and then we'll move into our presentation. Tim?
Thanks, John, and thanks so much for being here tonight, and thanks for everybody watching from home. It's great to see you all back on campus. I will admit, getting the momentum this week with our guys has been a little slow. The day off Monday, the snow day, the late start, so it's great to see some energy in here tonight. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come back up to campus in the evening to hear a little bit about this college process. And for those of you who are returning parents to the college process, welcome back. For those of you who are new, welcome. I assure you that you are in good hands with our college counselors here at Fairfield Prep. They do a tremendous job at getting to know your son and finding the place that is going to be the best fit for him. I think that's the thing that Mr. Hanrahan continuously drives home with our students and with myself as well, that we're looking for the best fit. We're looking for the place where your sons can go and take what he has learned here at Fairfield Prep, apply it, become a better person, and be able to graduate from college in 4 years and go out in the world and make it a better place using that foundation that he learned here at Fairfield Prep. So it's a great time to be here at Prep. We're real thrilled at all the initiatives that we're doing, all the changes that we're making. One of the biggest changes this year, as you've seen and I'm sure as you've heard, is kind of this kind of restructuring of our dean's role. So Mrs. Lombardi is our assistant dean of students. I know many of your sons had her in English, whether they're freshman or sophomore year, but it's great to have someone like her kind of looking over the entire class. So certainly use her and use everyone here on staff. So I want to reiterate again that we are here for you. We're here for your sons. We come here every day humbled that you've trusted us with your most prized possessions, and we don't take that lightly, and we love working with them every day. The energy they bring is great, and we love being here every day. So thank you. You are in good hands. If I can ever be of any help, please let me know, and I'll pass it off to Mrs. Lombardi.
Thank you, Mr. Dee. I'd just like to echo his sentiment. It's so wonderful to see what an amazing crowd here tonight. The support that you show for your boys is so important. And the number of you here this evening just reiterates how important they are to you, and I hope you see how important they are to us. I am really just here as an additional layer of support throughout this process, throughout the next year and a half, as they conclude their journey here at Fairfield Prep and begin their next step of their journey somewhere else. And we're here to make sure that that fit for them is the right fit. And that goes all the way back to the initial conversation. Maybe you were sitting here 2.5, almost 3 years ago, figuring out whether prep was the right fit for your son. And I hope as you're sitting here tonight that you realize that prep was the right fit for your son. And we're going to continue to be here for him through the rest of his journey. This process is it's a big process, and it can be a daunting process. For many of them, it's going to take a little bit of time. But we are here, again, to be with them every single step of the way. I've heard from many of you this year questions about academics, questions about attendance, questions about sports, questions about extracurriculars. So please keep calling, keep emailing. I'm happy to talk with each and every one of you. Your boys stop by all the time. So please be a familiar face, and I'm just a phone call away. So thank you again for being here tonight.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Jess, for supporting us tonight. So we have a full program tonight, and there'll be plenty of time for questions. We're going to have questions at the end, and you'll meet Corry in just a minute, and he'll certainly have some things to say, and he'll take questions at the end as well. Before we actually begin our presentation, I wanted to offer a few words, a little bit of context, so that you kind of know the world that your son is working on his college plans here at Fairfield Prep. So to begin with, college counseling at Prep is a personal, reflective series of activities. Each new class of students, in this case juniors, brings in their own unique array of interests, talents, and goals, and that's what we're here to talk to them about as we work with them. For the past 2.5 years, our counseling activities as a department have been focused on supporting your sons in their personal development with their academic readiness for the challenges that have been, are, and will be facing over the course of this year and next. Their path has led them to the present moment, and now we move more deeply into the college process, the college counseling process. It's now that your sons are being challenged to translate their personal growth, their academic success, into college possibilities for themselves. And as they do so, it's important to take a moment to reflect on the exciting challenges of the year ahead, and for us really to highlight our partnership, the partnership we share with your sons and with you in guiding them. So tonight we want to identify the roles that we play in supporting your sons, from now through their graduation. We want to highlight their responsibilities in the process, I'm sure you know what they are, and the ways that you can support your sons. As college counselors, our goal is to provide an effective roadmap, one which will provide them with advice and direction. Our college counseling group presentations, we meet once per cycle, and individual meetings are intended to help your sons become aware of the tasks and challenges involved. We're aware of the stresses that often accompany the process. I'm sure you are too. However, we also know that that stress can be minimized by providing your son with good, timely information, consistent support to help them remain in control in the process. Our ultimate goal is to help each member of the prep class of 2025 craft an effective plan for navigating the steps through the college process. In our seminars and our one-on-one conversations, we speak to the importance of having a balanced approach, including strong and sustained academic and personal growth records. We emphasize that by their continued growth, that is, we're finishing a semester, starting a new one soon, we emphasize that by that growth, they will continue to create appropriate college choices for themselves. So the initial college list might not be the eventual college list. The process moves briskly. Had that conversation with the parent just a few minutes ago. And so as we sit here tonight, it's important to understand that within a year from now, most of your sons will have filed all of their college applications. I'm sure they will have. And many will have a number of acceptances and possibly the acceptance that they favor. So it does happen quickly, although it is over the course of the next year. That said, it's essential to us that we assist them with their organization and help them recognize and engage the tasks in the process. It's also important for you and for us to see the process as an essential step in their personal growth and self-discovery, and through it, to help them realize their uniqueness, and then to represent it. There's a key word there, representing their uniqueness. Now more than ever, communication is key, and we continually encourage your sons, and we want to encourage you as well to schedule time with us. You know how to use the Calendly app, and if you don't, let us know, and we'll certainly familiarize you. Your sons definitely do, and we encourage them to do that with us. As the year ahead progresses, consider that the college process involves one really important, if not weighty, decision followed by another, and that those challenges, making those decisions, must be managed alongside many other responsibilities that are required of them, that is, academic responsibilities, etc., as juniors and then seniors, and making room for those things that they like to do that aren't necessarily in the classroom, sports, arts. We're about to send off a group of students to Cairo 79 next week, things like that. They need to have space for that. So that is all of us, all of our understanding, patience, and support, and timely guidance are keys to making the process a positive growth step. So one essential goal that we must have is to assist your sons in maintaining balance through the stages and steps of the process so that they can leave space in their lives for intellectual and personal growth opportunities. Junior year and senior year provide those, which prep offers between now and their graduation. Opportunities which make this a special time of self-definition and of broadening. So, good decisions, timely actions, a workable timetable, an appropriate strategy, and effective communication are all important in taking the natural next step in academic and personal growth. So we're going to launch our formal presentation in just a moment. And so, again, one of our goals tonight was to make ourselves and our roles known to you, to make you aware of your son's responsibility in engaging the activities involved in the college process, which relate to junior year, the summer following, and senior year as well. We also want to make you aware of the topics and activities that we have been and will be discussing with your sons in our junior counseling seminars and in our individual meetings. And then we also want to offer you some insights on how to support your sons at home. Sure you know those already, but we'll certainly be happy to supply a few thoughts on that. So we want to begin our presentation this evening. Kind of talk through those slides, sorry. By welcoming Mr. Corry Unis, who's with us tonight, Vice President for Enrollment Management at Fairfield University, graduated from fellow Jesuit School, Lemoyne College in 2003. I can say that right. There we go. He's been working in enrollment management for his entire career. He received his graduate degree from Syracuse and has been working at Fairfield University since the fall of 2018. In addition to his duties at Fairfield, Corry is a regionally elected delegate representing all universities in Connecticut to the College Board. He's been an excellent friend of prep, great resource for our office and for our students. We're grateful for his support and presentation this evening. Corry.
Well, good evening. It's great to be with you and share some of the college search process and share a little high-level overview about what goes into the application and how to help advise your sons as they navigate what is a stressful but ultimately a really exciting time in their life. My kids, I have 3 kids, they're all young. They're 7th grade, 4th grade, and 1st. And so I haven't really seen this firsthand with my own kids, but I've been working with my sister who has a senior in her house, and as he's been navigating this process, and I see the stressed look and the hopefulness of when the app is submitted and the wait and then the calls and the checking of the portals and all that. So while I haven't had the firsthand experience of navigating with my own kids through this process, I definitely see the stress and the excitement and all that goes into it with our families. And so the big picture thing, if there's one thing that you take away from tonight, is that it will work out. I promise you this. It will work out. It may not be the absolute number one choice going in October 1, but you will find a place that will be the right home and the right fit for your sons as you navigate these next 15 or so months through the college search and selection process. So today I want to kind of break my talk up into a few different things. One is list building, what goes into finding and helping our sons, advise them to how to even know where to begin this process. The second is I'll talk a little bit about what goes into the application and how admission officers see the different and various components of the application. And then I'll spend a couple minutes talking about some of the trends, whether it be the recent Supreme Court decision, direct admissions, legacy, financial aid, all of that. That's kind of the hot button issues. And then I'll turn it back over to John, and then we definitely will do Q&A. I always find that those questions at the end are really some of the best part of the discussion. So list building, where do you start, and how do you start? We know our kids, we know them really well, and sometimes our kids have ideas as to what schools they should put on their list just because there's that certain sense of this is a hot school, or this is a school that a lot of my friends applied to, or they looked on Naviance and saw the graphs and think, okay, that could be a likely or a reach or a safety or whatever terminology that we want. But helping your sons navigate how to create that list is really critical. And so I think talking to them about what is it that these next 4 years are, what do they want out of that experience? Do they like being at this type of environment where they are a name and a face and teachers know them and they have an intimate experience here? Or do they want to be someplace where they can be a little bit more anonymous? Do they want to be part of a Jesuit school? Do they want to be part of a private school, public school? Do they want big-time Division I sports? Do they want a Division III where they have an opportunity to play on a sports team? So having those types of conversations and really trying to help and advise them, because a lot of times those initial lists of school searches will all look similar for all of the different families here. And so it's helping to broaden that out a little bit. And so I always encourage families, especially families that I meet with from prep, and I've been lucky enough to do this almost, if not every year since 2018, to say there's a few things that I would, from years of experience of doing admissions, I would always recommend. Put a Jesuit school or two on that list. For gentlemen who've graduated from prep, there's a certain, they speak that same language. There's a comfort, there's a fit. So, and there's a variety of different types of Jesuit schools that you can search out, whether it be the large ones like Loyola Chicago, or some of the smaller ones, the liberal arts ones, or the university centers. Find one or two that may fit in a location and major that would be pertaining to your kids. I always say, it's okay to look far away. But a lot of times there's a regression back towards the East Coast or the Northeast. But have that talk about where do you feel comfortable being a plane ride away? Do you feel comfortable, knowing that we'll see you at Thanksgiving and Christmas and maybe spring break? Is that something that is okay for you and your family as you're navigating this process? Making sure that the student has some sort of understanding of major or career interest, because you have to match that with the right school. We do not expect 16, 17, 18-year-olds to know exactly what they want to do. I don't know if I'm going to do college admissions my whole life. I don't know what I want to do. How can we ask a 17-year-old to make that decision? But we need to, if they have a really interesting niche that they love biomedical engineering, well, there's not a lot of places that can have that. So making sure that you're aligning your list of schools and that school crafting with some of the majors that may be of interest to your kids. One of the things that often gets overlooked in this process, and it's one that's not easy to talk about, is the financial piece of all of this. And so for some families, a public school is going to be the best option, or maybe a private school with merit-based scholarships. Having that conversation as best you can with kids, it can be challenging, but helping understand that cost structure of what those schools and family budgets is important, because the hardest time for me and my team is April of a student's senior year. You work for those last 14 months of getting that kid interested and excited, but budget-wise, it just doesn't make sense for the family. And so trying to have those conversations, if appropriate for your family, to have some sort of understanding of what that budget is going to be. Schools are trying to be more transparent with their costs through the net price calculator and other tools, so you can have an understanding of what that net price would be, whether it be at a private school or a public school. But trying to build that list larger at first, and then start to winnow it down a little bit. When my nephew was touring Fairfield last year, I asked him, I said, so Noah, talk to me about your experience here. So he had, previous to visiting Fairfield, he went to Charleston and went to Elon. And so I'm trying to talk with him about, what did you like about those visits? What was exciting to you about that community? How did that fit? How did it feel to you when you were there? Was this a place that you could see yourself comfortable? Is it your idea of what the good school is versus what your friends or what you read on a guidebook? What does it feel like to you? And so when we talk, I think John mentioned a little while ago, or maybe it was Tim, about that fit. I see it as a three-part compass. There's an academic fit of, am I around my peers? Is this a place where I'm going to be challenged, but that good sort of challenge? Do they have the types of careers or success rates in the types of fields that I'm interested in? So that's the academic fit. And then you have that social fit, which is just as important. Are these folks that I feel comfortable with? Is the distance from home okay? Is this a place where I can find my group of people and have a really amazing 4 years? And then, of course, there's that financial piece and the financial fit. All three have to coalesce together in order, as you start to navigate and shape that list. It's okay to start off with a big list and then start to figure out what it is. And I always hear from parents, like, that car ride home after those first couple of visits are some of the most important discussions and bonding opportunities that you'll have with your kids as they start to move out of adolescence into adulthood and can kind of articulate some of the things that they're looking for. And so start broad, add a lot of schools, visit if you can. The visit, it will never, ever take away from the virtual or reading about a school. The visit on campus is really the key piece. And so as you think about April break, some schools will start to open up for juniors to visit in April break. Some schools will take visitors now as juniors, but some are a little bit restrictive as they're kind of still crafting their class right now. But definitely by April break or Easter break and then into the summer, schools will be welcoming juniors to visit and do information sessions and tours. When you're on the campus, I always tell students and families, grab a copy of the school newspaper, find out some authentic things about what's going on. It's not always the most charming view of the school at times, but it's definitely, you can find out the hot button issues. Walk around after the tour, walk around, go to the coffee shop on campus, or see if you can grab something in the cafeteria and just observe and find that comfort zone, and if it's a place that would work for you and your kids as you navigate that search process. So as you think about the application process, there's a few things I'd like you to keep in mind. There's decision plans, which we're going to get into, or John and his team will get into today. There's early decision, there's early action, there's regular decision. There's a whole host of different decision plans. Use your decision plan wisely. Your school counselors, and you all made a really wise decision of having your kids or your sons come to prep because they're going to get and receive amazing counseling that will help them. Everybody thinks that they want to be an early action candidate. It may not be the right decision plan for some of your sons. If they're a late bloomer, if they started off first year, was a little slow, and now they're really finding their footing, regular decision at more competitive schools may be the right fit. For some students who they know in their heart this is the one school that they want, use that early decision plan if it makes sense for your families. So trust your counselors. They have a real good sense of what's going on within college admission and choosing the right decision plan for your sons. So generally speaking, there are 8 academic components that go into an admission review. First 4 are more quantitative, the second 4 are more qualitative. I'll spend just a second or two on each one of those. So the first is your strength of schedule and your strength of school. Well, when you enrolled your sons at prep, you gave them a tremendous gift. So admission counselors will use a tool to assess the quality of every school in the country. So at selective places like a Fairfield or other places that are similar to us, we received applications from 2,000 high schools, 1,800 high schools in a given year. We don't know all of those high schools, and so we rely on some data to help us understand the context of that application. And so we have a tool that ranks every high school in the country. Fairfield Prep is consistently in the top 97th, 98th percentile of all schools, not just in Connecticut, not just in Fairfield County, but in the entire country. So your sons are getting a really great quality of education, and it's reflected well in how that admission officer views that file. So for a lot of us, first thing we do is we're looking at the context. So where is the student from? Where did he go to school? Okay, what's the quality of that school so that we know that an A there really truly means an A because they're competing against other kids who are really talented. So the context of that file and the context of understanding that strength is really important. Coupled with that is that school profile that comes to us. And in that, it tells us every class that is offered here at the prep. It gives us context about different grading policies, weighted versus unweighted, how the school views APs and how many they can take, all that. So we pull that school profile apart, and we're looking at the strength of the school, we're looking at the strength of the schedule that student enrolled in. By far, those things weigh really heavily, because if I'm comparing a kid who has 4 honors and 6 APs, or 4 honors and 4 APs at a school in the top 97th percentile, versus a kid who has similar GPA but is at a school in the bottom 25th percentile with no AP and no honors, well, then that grade-to-grade comparison just doesn't hold. So it's about the context of understanding the grades amongst the quality of the classes that student enrolled in. So we like, in admission land, we love to look at 4 years of English, 4 years of history. We like to look at 3 years of lab sciences. Typically, most schools are going to want to see to the pre-calc or above level. There's some exceptions to every rule. And then typically, we want to see 3 years of foreign language. For every student, there's some differences. And then beyond that, those APs, those honors, when appropriate, really does make a difference. The second piece would be the grades. So we're going to look at the grade right off the transcript. That, if it's weighted or unweighted, if it's unweighted, we'll calculate some weight. For you all, Fairfield Prep provides us with a weighted GPA for the context of that application. And then what we'll do with that is we'll also create a recalculated GPA. I'll use that weighted one, but it's important that families do this. Once the junior year is over, you'll go on to Naviance, look at that 3-year transcript, and calculate a GPA based upon the 5 major subject areas of English, math, history, science, foreign language. And for us, and if you're applying to other Jesuit schools or Catholic schools, a lot of times we'll use your theology or religious studies courses and create a new GPA based upon that. So we try to really understand what was that student's academic context, the rigor, and then how did they perform in those real core subject GPAs. The third piece would be standardized testing. Standardized testing is something that I still recommend every student should take an SAT and or ACT at least once. Whether or not you decide to submit, that's a different story. And at the end of my remarks, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about test optional. What does that really mean? Test blind, and those kind of buzzwords that we're all hearing about it. But with regard to tests, if you do submit a test, that will be factored in. And typically, schools want to see your best work. Not every school will do it the same way, but many schools will look at your best critical reading and your best or enhanced reading and writing plus your mathematics score and calculate a super score based upon your 2 best subsections. And we do that with the ACT as well. And so one piece of advice that I definitely give to you is while an SAT rarely is going to be the definitive thing that gets your son into college or not, it definitely can add additional context to the application. Whether or not you choose to submit it, that's something best left for you working with those individual schools and working with your school counselors or your here at Prep, where they have a good understanding of saying, okay, hey, you know what? That score can really enhance your application at X, Y, and Z school, but maybe pull it back from these other schools. The fourth piece would be rank in class. Prep doesn't rank, so it would not factor into the evaluation. At schools that do rank, then admission officers will review that. Then there are 4 more subjective things, and these are just as important as the academic pieces. So when we talk about holistic review, it's understanding the context of that applicant, understanding all the different things that went into making that student who he is today. And so from a holistic standpoint, we're going to look at the college essay. And the college essay we don't expect that the student is writing about, philosophy from the 1500s. What we want them to write about is something that is interesting to them, something that tells us a story about who that student is. And so one piece of advice that I typically recommend, and when I talk to students, say, okay, think about your phone and take your phone out and look at your photo app. Your college essay shouldn't be about every picture that's in that photo app, but it should be about 1 or 2 of those moments. That's telling me something about you. While it's wonderful to learn about a grandfather that you've had, but unless that relates then to who you are and where you're going, that's not as powerful as finding about who that young man is or why they want to study X or Y, Z, or why Kairos was something that unlocked something deep in them, or that mission trip or that trip really helped them throughout understanding about who they are in their personal journey and their growth. So make that essay about them. Yes, we want it to be their students' best work, but we really, for the most part, want to get to know who your son is through that college essay. The next piece would be your recommendations. Here at Prep, the counselors do an amazing job of writing a narrative about who your sons are. You don't find that everywhere, and it's one of the things that I love reading Fairfield Prep students' applications because I get a sense of understanding who they are through that journey and the journey they've been on for the last 3 to 4 years. And so your counselor will automatically write a recommendation about your son, and they'll link in both who they are from a community standpoint to who they are as a student. Typically, schools would also recommend an additional letter of recommendation. 1 or 2 can also be sufficient. You don't need to be the family who sends in 18 different letters of recommendation from every teacher he's ever had. It's overkill, but usually we recommend the school counselor recommendation, potentially a teacher, maybe a member of the Jesuit community, maybe a coach, one or two other supplemental recommendations that can help enhance that story of telling us who that student is. And then the other piece would be an interview. Not every school will interview. We're seeing at selective places, it's like a 50-50 or 60-40 split of schools that will interview. If your sons get a chance to interview, have them do it. It shouldn't cause too much anxiety. Most of the time, interviews at admission offices will be with people like me or my team, or would be with seniors or trained tour guides who are used to working with high school seniors. It is the number one way a student can really enhance elements of their application. I don't just say this because I love Fairfield and Fairfield Prep. When I meet with your sons from Prep, they almost all do an amazing job of being able to articulate who they are. They've actually discerned, which a lot of high school boys, if we know, don't have that ability to talk about it. Guys that are coming from the prep do have an opportunity to talk about who they are and the growth that they've experienced over their years here as being part of the prep family. So I really recommend, if you can do an interview, to do it. No one's there to ask them, some physics-based question that they covered once, 1 week, when they were juniors, but it's really about getting to know who they are and their interest in the school. I always say, to prepare for an interview, it's really easy. Take a look at your transcript, have an understanding of who you are as a student, have an understanding of what type of majors you're interested in. If you're truly undecided, it's okay. You can say, I'm open to growth, right? We talk about that. And then the third piece is have a couple questions ready to go. Because at the end of every admission interview, it's going to be, so what kind of questions do you have for me? In the beginning, the first question will be some sort of tell me about yourself. So you've got about half the interview done with those 2 or 3 questions, and be prepared to ask a couple. We don't expect students to be experts about our schools. We just don't want them to be engaged. Interviews are really important because it's a deep way of demonstrating your interest in the school. And so when I talk about those 8 criteria that go into the application review, typically what happens is we'll evaluate it, multiple sets of eyes will see that application, a first reader, a second reader. Typically, most schools will read by specific territory, so they get to know those schools pretty well and form a relationship with John and his team. And then they'll make a rating on that application. And then that rating typically is how admission committees will see it and determine how they want to proceed. One thing that's overarching and that is layered into that, not necessarily reflected on an academic review, is engagement. As applications continue to soar at schools across the country, and as schools are looking at selectivity and yield is the percentage of admitted students who enroll at a school. They look at students, many, not all. So when I say this, it's not necessarily applying to every school, because maybe a UConn wouldn't necessarily look at engagement, or a UMass may not, where more of the private schools would, but I would trust your counselors on that. But demonstrating your interest, or what I like to call, how engaged is that student? My research tells me that a student that's engaged with my office and my team from the time that they're juniors or sophomores or seniors through the decision-making process are 100% more likely to enroll than the students that are not engaged. When I look at a regression analysis, so a statistical tool to look at a student's engagement at the time that they apply for admission versus how many enroll, it is a major step function that the more engaged that they were, the higher probability that the student, if admitted, would accept their offer. And so we're looking for engagement. Now, what does engagement mean? It's not just randomly opening up every email from the school. That doesn't really tell us a lot. It's about, did that student visit as a binary, yes or no? And if that student visited, was it what type of visit? How did that student engage with us during that visit? Did that student interact with us afterwards? Meaning, is there, did they meet the admission rep when they came to prep in the fall? Or you don't have to email your admission counselor every single day, but was there a follow-up email after an interview or something along those lines? So we look at different interactions and call that part of the engagement. We're also looking at we're looking at the quality and the context of us getting to know that student. So it could be that the student was on our website a lot and responded or engaged with us via emails. Those are less important than the overall coming to campus, meeting with somebody, meeting your admission rep, keeping a deep line of engagement with them. The reason for that is we want to see that student is interested. We want to see that student sees this as a place where he or she could fit in and find a home here. Now, every story is different. There's going to be a school or two in California that you're going to really love and may not have an opportunity to visit until after acceptance. That's okay. You can still engage by doing a virtual information session or a virtual tour, some sort of connection with the school. It doesn't mean you have to be at every school shaking every admission rep's hand in the country. It's more about showcasing that you are generally interested, that you just didn't randomly apply on the last day of the Common App deadline and have never heard of that school previously. So it's more about showing that you're engaged and there's a probability that you have some interest within that school. On the admission decisions, we're in this world where some admission decisions just don't make sense. There's going to be students that apply from, a student may apply to, a couple of kids may apply to the same school and 2 out of the 3 get in, or 1 out of the 3 gets in, and people are scratching their head, why? And there's never, ever a silver answer to say, okay, this is exactly, Johnny did this, Steve did that, and Matt did not do that. It rarely comes down to something simple where you can point to it, because these admission decisions are becoming more and more complex. And so things like demonstrated interest and engagement definitely can factor into how schools view you. Sometimes it could come down to majors. Sometimes it can come down to, they have room for one student from a particular region and they're making tough admissions decisions. So that's the hard part of our job in admissions, is trying to explain what we're doing and what we're looking for, because it's never really neat and never always fits into a box. And so on behalf of our admission professional, I apologize for the confusion that's out there. Most people who work in admissions, as you go through this process, are going to be as transparent as they can be. Most people who work in admissions are advocating for your kids. We don't get into admissions, I haven't done this for 20 years, because I want to deny 50, 60% of the kids who are applying. I want to find kids who want to be part of my community. I want to find kids who are going to benefit from it and be great ambassadors for our community. That's the majority of our profession. There's always times where you're going to find these schools who will just tell you, oh yeah, we proudly reject 90% of our students. That's not that's not the dominant culture. It's mainly people who are going to want to advocate and find that partnership with your sons as you navigate what is a stressful process. I'll close with a few different kind of the hot button topics that are going on and some changes in admissions. So test optional. I think last year at this time, there was a question of, do you think test optional is here to stay? And at that point, I was pretty convinced that I think it is here to stay. We had seen some movement with test blind. Test blind means that a school will not even consider, even if you send the scores, it doesn't factor in to how they evaluate. So University of California system is test blind. And then there's test optional, which means that it's your choice whether or not you want to send it. And then there's test required. So like Georgetown, MIT, they require tests. Some of the southern flagship schools require, like University of Florida. Over the last couple of months, I've started to see some data come out that suggests that potentially some schools will opt back into test required. I think it's, for your sons, likely going to be the atmosphere right now will likely be the same for next year, with maybe a couple changes. So that's why earlier on I mentioned definitely take a test. It's not everybody's favorite thing to do on a Saturday or school day or whatnot, but it is something that can help a student. So what does it mean to be optional? It means that it puts the onus on you as a family and the counseling team to help navigate whether or not you should send. So what to look for in a test optional is look at the middle 50% on their website and see, does your score match within that? Or maybe that student has a really good SAT, but their GPA isn't wonderful. That could be another reason to send. One thing that schools have had, or maybe one misconception I should say about test optional is, now that every school went test optional, scores are below average. And it's not actually the truth. The scores actually nationwide have been going up slightly on the SAT, a handful of points. Fairfield, and part of my job with our university, is I have access to all students' SATs, but without their personally identifiable information. So I can look at, on a typical year, 60% of our students are test optional. I can look at that 60% without knowing who they are and match them up to see the ones who enrolled at Fairfield. And their test scores, some are a little bit below where we would typically want them, but for the majority, they're all falling with where they historically have. The tests can be helpful to you. It will not make or break your son's decision. There are some schools, and your counselors here will know which ones really do. When they say test optional, it's more of a wink. But for the vast majority, when they are test optional, they truly are. We could see this if you have younger boys or younger kids in the next couple of years. I suspect you may see some of the more selective places going back to requiring a test during the admission process. There's been a lot of talk about race and ethnicity on the college application and what to disclose, who has access to what, and how does that factor into admissions decisions. That one is one that is really hard to give an overarching view because every school is going to do it differently. Some schools are going to hide that information. Some schools will have that publicly available for their admission counselors to understand the application. The one thing I would say is having a student tell their story of who they are is really important. And you can do that whether or not it's on a box on the Common App. It can be done in the essay, and it can be done through the context of understanding who that student is. So tell us your story. We want to know who these students are. We want to be able to have the context of that student, and we encourage those narratives on the admission application. The other kind of new topic is financial aid, which is not really new, but there's some significant changes. And where do I think it's going to affect Fairfield Prep families? The biggest change is on the FAFSA this year. If you have multiples in school, and your school uses federal methodology or uses the FAFSA to determine your need, for multiple kids in college at the same time, you used to get a break. Basically, if we make Financial Aid 101 really simple, after filling out the FAFSA, it comes up with a formula that says your expected family contribution is $50,000, whatever it may be. And if you had multiples in school, it'd get cut in half for each school. Now it doesn't happen that way. And so we're seeing this year, the first year of the FAFSA change, that families with multiples in school, the amount of aid that they may qualify is different than what it was in the past. Schools like Fairfield, we use a different form called the CSS profile. So we are still providing a break for families that have multiple kids in college. Not every school is going to do that. So as you navigate this process, and as you do those admission visits, and if need-based financial aid is going to be a factor in your decision, and you have multiple kids in school, I'd ask them how they're going to handle that, because that is a really big, thorny issue that's out there. So if affordability and having multiple kids in school and need-based aid coalesce together, asking those schools how they're going to proceed with that really is an important question for you as you navigate those searches, because in my 20 years, I've never seen the data looks so different than it did from one year to the next. It is like a 50% change for many families. And so it can be significant, especially for schools that don't use that CSS profile form. I'm just going to take one more look at my notes. I think I covered most of what I wanted to get into, and hopefully you have some questions for us at the end, but I know it's a stressful process. We are here to help all of us in admissions. Whether your son has questions about Fairfield or not, if I can be a resource for you, I'm only a phone call away. Typically, every year, a couple of families will take me up on that. So if you need anything, don't hesitate to give me a call or email me. If you don't have my contact information, Mr. Hanrahan or the team can get it, or it's on the Fairfield U website. But look forward to taking your questions in a little bit, and thanks for your time and attention.
Sorry for that interruption before you saw those movie advertisements. It was not part of our presentation, just so you know. I'm pretty sure you knew that anyway. Although we're not going to let Corry get away, we wanted to say a little thanks, Steve. Thank you so much. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so we're going to skate through our PowerPoint right now. And remember, as I mentioned, not only is this being recorded, but the PowerPoint and the recording will be sent out as well. So you're going to hear from everybody at some point in time. So My role here is really to talk a little bit about what we have been doing in our junior counseling seminars. So as I mentioned earlier, and I think you know this already, we meet once per academic cycle. So we kicked off the year talking a little bit about how important academic record is. Corry spoke to that already, obviously. Strength of schedule and performance and subject, absolutely, especially in the core areas, but really in all areas. Corry did mention that, the recalculation of GPA, certainly. However, theology is part of that GPA, that weighted that we report. So once again, academic record, the trends that students produce inform and reveal. So again, stepping up. And by the way, we're going to talk a little bit later on, a little bit about course selection. That's certainly one of those trends as well, certainly strength of schedule. We've done a standardized testing overview. I'm going to quickly click through some of these things. We've certainly worked with your sons on identifying and researching appropriate colleges, and we'll continue to do that. We did have a Jesuit excellence tour of colleges in the fall as well. Some Jesuit colleges stopped by to meet with your sons. That was an internal college fair. And a number of your sons, possibly yourselves as well, were down at the college fair in the Hartford Healthcare Amphitheater in October, or actually in September. Naviance review, certainly it's something that we've done already, we'll continue to do. We talked a little bit about ballparking, in other words, deciding whether those colleges are they competitive, are they reach, are they safe, things like that. And of course, continue to grow. I think that thinking about the fact that Kairos is going off next week, Kairos 79, and there'll be certainly another one, 80, will be in the month of April. These are opportunities for personal growth, spiritual growth, personal growth, bonding, becoming more aware of who you are. All those things are very important. So, once again, you never draw the line and say we're done. The growth happens till the end. So seeking growth, we've talked about that as well. In the second semester, which starts next Monday, by the way, as we draw the line here, the 19th, tomorrow is the last day in semester 1. Grades will be reported and they'll be available to you on the 26th. So what are we going to be doing in that second semester in our group sessions and then following up in our individual conversations as well? Once again, I'll kind of touch on a few of these things. Certainly, testing plan. And that's a question we're asking. What is your testing plan? As it's already been mentioned, solid scores certainly can help. Non-reported scores don't hurt, if you're looking at test optional schools, which most schools are. But you have to know, are your scores going to be helpful? So we've talked about that, and we'll continue to talk about that. Senior course selection, very important. Again, we're going to be doing some discussions on this on Monday and Tuesday of next week, depending on which day your son has his counseling seminar. And we're going to repeat that on the 1st and 2nd of October, and again on the 13th and 14th of October, and work with your sons as they select or request their courses. And then really talking a little bit about what's best for them, having the right level of rigor, so to speak. Key factors, Corry did a really nice job on that, of course, for you, and we'll do the same with your sons. What is it the colleges are looking for? Well, they need to know that. So again, I'm involved in a lot of activities. That's going to get me into the school of my choice, that and other things. So again, key factors. Campus visits, it's already been spoken about. Activities resume, a living document, absolutely. So what's new, right? What's new this year? What's going to be new in the spring? What's new over the summer? Not everything that goes on a resume is generated here, or it's an activity that happens at Fairfield Prep. All very important. And again, same thing in the fall. And we've had seniors, try out and audition for the play for the first time, never been in a dramatic production. Yeah, keep that resume moving forward. I think that's important. We'll talk about the essay in the second semester. We will establish a common application with all juniors. They'll have an application. Oops, did I go backwards there, did I? Okay, sorry about that. All right, so yes, establish a common application account. Again, if all goes well, and if our directions are followed, and we work on this in our class sessions, your sons can have a nearly completed application before they leave for the summer. And of course, it'll roll over to the new version of the Common App in August 1 after they sign in again. Yeah, the essay can be worked on later, and some of the other things can be refined. We don't push it. We don't rush it, but get the nuts and bolts things in there and get some of those tasks out of the way. Teacher recommendation request procedures. We'll talk about interviewing. Student brag sheets, yeah, we want those. And we're going to call for your sons to submit their brag sheets. And then we'll talk about returning ready in the fall. Ready for what? Ready to begin the conversation about filing your application. How are you going to apply to your different colleges? Those are strategic conversations. And again, in the senior fall, Corry talked a little bit about another way to, and I love the word engagement more than demonstration of interest, by the way. It's a richer word, a deeper word. So we had really well over 150 college representatives. Corry represented Fairfield here at Prep, who visit us to run small group conversations with students who have already decided they're going to apply to those colleges. I think we had 170 this year. It was a pretty big year. Near, far, large, small, you name it. Many were here. And they are people that know us and help us to get to know them and our office as well. And in the meantime, it's another layer of engagement. So if you've been to campus or you've been in communication, or it's a school in California that you didn't visit but the representative is coming here, there were some of those too. Loyola Marymount, Santa Clara sent their representatives. Make sure you get there. Again, Common App final review. This is a fall activity. Electronic requests. We're going to go through all those things. And really, don't need to cover them in any great detail. We're going to be doing these in the fall. The goal of this presentation is to let you know that, we're not only talking about your sons as juniors and seniors as well. Okay, so individual college planning meetings. Once again, scheduling with the counselor. We talked about that already. Individual exploration of seminar topics, personalized college lists. Again, this is more of a checklist than anything else. We will discuss with your son's teacher recommendations and help them to decide or listen to them as they decide who their recommenders will be. Summer to-do list, etc. And now we're going to hear from Rick Hutchinson about application review. Rick? Thank you. Just tap the screen on your side.
Got it. Hi, again, Rick Hutchinson. So Corry touched on some of these topics, but I want to get him as well. I think the little graphic up there is great because it is like a piece of a puzzle putting it together, and a lot of different pieces come together in terms of the colleges making a decision on their son. It's helpful to understand this because as you look at colleges, it will help you understand what they're looking for and maybe craft a little bit about what you're doing when you do an application, or understand whether your son fits in well with those individual schools. So, there's really two parts of it. If I go back to this, you've got the more that hard data. We talked about GPA, classes, grades, potentially test scores that you might submit. There is that hard data. And then there's that more personal aspect of, it sort of kind of falls into two different categories. Let's talk about that hard data. Really is academically, nothing's going to replace the transcript. Nothing's going to replace that academic record. You are going to a college. It is about a school, so that's going to be a primary focus. Colleges do tend to focus on the 5 core academic areas: English, math, science, social science, and foreign language. That doesn't mean to dismiss the other classes they take in the arts or in theology by any means. They certainly are considered, but those core areas are kind of what they're going to sort of really focus in on the most. So, and finding that balance of rigor is really important. It is great to have a lot of honors and APs, but if it impacts your overall performance, it's kind of counterproductive. I think the colleges want to see a level of rigor where students maintain the same level of performance that they can manage. It's not always to predict. It's hard to predict those things. We understand. So that's why we try to have conversations. And certainly, as your sons are in, actually just next week is we're going to begin the process of their course requests for senior year. They're going to have a lot of decisions for senior year. There's a lot of great classes that they can take. And these are great conversations to come in and talk with Pete and Laura and John and myself so we can help them craft the right course of studies, because it'll be the last academic information that they'll present to colleges in senior year, and we can help them make those decisions. Getting just a little bit, Corry touched on standardized testing, but sort of a little bit of nuts and bolts. We do recommend that all students go through that process. If you're thinking that the testing just isn't reaching a level based on PSATs or the pre-SAT that I took last year, come speak with us. We can help give you some guidance on what might be the best course of action to go forward. But if you haven't already, we would encourage you to get registered for testing. The testing dates are starting to fill up. There is, I think with a late registration, you can still sign up for an ACT in February. The next big one coming up would be the March SAT. Again, your sons all have a College Board account. They would have had that when they took the PSAT in the fall. You would have had to set up your own ACT account if you wanted to take the ACT exam. We certainly recommended taking it 2 to 3 times. Colleges do a process of at least most will super score, where they can take your best sub scores from different days, recalculate it, and that becomes your best overall score. So taking it multiple times is a good opportunity. It's not too often that a student will see all of their best scores on one test date. They often are achieved over multiple test dates, and that's why they do that process of super scoring. Corry touched on the ideas of test optional and how some colleges might be moving in that direction. If you're wondering what colleges actually require right now, you had mentioned Georgetown, MIT, and Purdue all require. The public universities in Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee do require it, as well as the United States military academies all require it. And that's the list right there. So, but I'm going to tap his brain a little bit to find out who these other colleges are, because I'd like to know. We have found that certainly as students applying without a test score, it does not punish them in the process, but I won't, as Corry says, with a wink and a nod, there are some situations where a strong test score can enhance an application, and that's another reason we encourage them to go through the process. If the dust settles in the fall and the decision is made not to send it in, great. Look, there's so many options they have. But if they can achieve a test score at a certain level, and that will really be contingent upon the student and the colleges they're applying to, we can help them make decisions on whether to send that in. One thing we found that the new digital SAT, they took the SAT in the fall, we've been getting some pretty positive feedback out from the students. I mean, wow, the College Board, sorry, Corry, but the College Boards, great positive feedback, but they really have, and they seem to like it. And so not to encourage people to go the SAT route, but it does seem to see something that students were comfortable with. It is shorter than it was before. It is very different from any SAT that you took when you were back in school. It's a very different feel. So if your son is really angling for that, there's a reason for that. I think there's a comfort level. And also, great website called Fair Test. If you're wondering what the testing policies are at colleges, that's a great comprehensive website for that. So now in terms of the personal profile that they're looking for, there are a lot of, Corry already touched on some of those things, essays and recommendations can all show it. Pete Francini and I were fortunate enough to go visit some colleges, it's about a year ago, and we, I don't mind saying this, it was at Johns Hopkins University, and they were talking about how they evaluated a student's sort of personal profile, and they used this expression of the 4 I's, and I've always used that since then. They talk about what are the students' interests, and then what's their initiative in that interest, what's their investment, and what's their impact in that interest. And that's really what they're talking about. Like, it's not one interest that they're looking for. It's what is the student passionate about, and how do they pursue that? How do they find enrichment in that? How do they find some successes in those areas? And so that's what really means the most to them. So if you think the 4 I's when you're thinking about those activities, that's really what they're looking for. Other special things that can happen in the demonstrated interest has been talking about, and there's other different little nuggets that can happen that can sort of distinguish a student. These are hard, students tend to sort of have these opportunities. Maybe they've had great athletic talent or a great special talent in music or theater that might distinguish themselves. And there are other little things. These are great, these little bullet points are great things to talk to the counselor individually about. We can help sort of guide you on whether these sort of special aptitudes might be something to sort of enhance an application or not. To go through, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on the terminology on this, because as you go to colleges, you're going to hear what their different application plans are. This is important because it's going to impact your decisions on how you apply, and it can impact admission prospects at some colleges. And it's something we can help guide you on, but it's good, important to understand what they mean. Regular decision just means it's a set deadline. Deadlines tend to usually be in January and February. Applications come in, and then usually decisions will be submitted usually sometime in March. The exact deadlines and the exact decision reporting dates can vary by school, but that's the approximate when it happens. Then there are the early programs, whether it's early action and early decision. While they sound similar and some people accidentally interchange them, they really do, they are very distinctively different. It's important to understand the difference. The idea is rather than waiting till March to get a decision, you're hoping to get that decision earlier. December, hopefully, some early actions or early decisions you don't find out until January. But what they're allowing you to do is apply in the fall. Regular decision deadlines might be January, but these deadlines might be as early as October 15th or November 1st, and thus find out a little earlier and not have to wait a longer time. The early action process allows you to do that early. You're free to apply to any number of colleges early action, and then you get your decision back, but there's no obligation to enroll. You can apply, you could get your admission decisions, you could continue to apply to other colleges' regular decision later on. That's the early action process. Early decision is really an old term that they used to call the binding decision. This is much different. This is, while the time frame is exactly the same as early action, this is where you're making a full commitment to that university, saying that I am 100% committing to your institution should you admit me. that can have an impact on admission chances, because your full commitment to them is a great sign for them. It's easy. It's a great opportunity to enroll a student that is fully committed to themselves. It's great for their enrollment to land students that want to be there. So that early decision, can it enhance an application? Can it give a boost? It can. And you will see on Naviance, when you go to the scattergrams in various colleges, it will indicate past students that have applied to various schools, and you will see situations where, and it will indicate whether an applicant was early decision or not. And you'll see some trends where an early decision applicants may not have quite the same data as other students and maybe gained admission, and that they got that extra consideration by making that commitment. So those are the general things. Restricted early action, some schools mean they restrict on how many other schools you can apply to, and early decision 2 just means that there's just a later date that you could apply, making that commitment. Rolling decision isn't as much out there. That's basically a school that has no deadlines whatsoever. They just take the application when you turn it in, and they send back the decision right away. So if you apply to schools, if it's a rolling decision school, it's better to be in there really early because they're just sending out decisions. So if you apply later, things might be filled up. So just hopefully they understand what those definitions mean, and they can help out. Trends. I kind of went in there. They don't even know that I did this. I changed this today. So I just pulled out some trends. I won't go through all of them. The top 4 really apply more to next year when you're making admission decisions, and that's that early decision is really enrolling. A lot of colleges enrolling a large portion of their class through early decision, and what that means is it just means the regular decision is a little bit more competitive to get into. There's more writing requirements out there. There's this process of self-reported grades where rather than the school taking a transcript, the student actually self-reports their grades. There's various methods. We run through that with the students in the fall and how to go about doing that. But just be aware you have a situation that might be kind of an extra step to do. And then also colleges more and more are using individual applicant portals. So you apply and then you set up this separate portal to sort of manage your application. We'll go through that a little bit more of that in the fall. So I'm now finding college fit. So we've got Bodie Miller over here, coming back from the ski mountain. So it's Pete Francini. Thanks.
Bodie Miller was a ski racer, just in case anyone didn't know. Anyway. Yeah, I coach the ski team, obviously. That's why I look like this today. So anyway, and my hair's a mess. So anyway, thank you guys for all being here. I know you guys have been sitting for, I think, an hour now. So I'll try to be as efficient and as quick as possible. When coming with each student is different. Every person who walks into our offices is different, and therefore each person's college list is different. I think it's really important to have those conversations with your son's counselor, have those conversations with your son. I say this every year, more conversations are better than fewer conversations. You just get to learn more about the student, figure out what they're looking for, what's important to them, and be willing to explore something new or different, beyond the handful of schools that everyone loves to apply to. Boston College, Villanova, Providence, Fordham. Those are all amazing. Those are all Fairfield University. Those are all amazing schools, but there are lots of schools out there. I forget the exact number, over 3,000 schools in the country. So it's really important to look at different options and be open to growth and look at different things. And break new ground. It's always fun when I had a young man apply to the University of, British Columbia this year in different places. And I'm always curious to see where guys end up each year. So conducting a true and holistic search is really, really important. And working on creating that college list. For a lot of guys, I know some of the parents in the room, we started working in the spring of their sophomore year, develop a list, go visit schools in April, then visit some stuff in the fall, as well as over the summer, visit more things over February break, and kind of by the end of junior year, not everyone, but for the most part, your college list is kind of set, and then you come in senior year and talk strategy. Do we go early decision here? What's my chances? Do I go far reach? Do I go just a reach school and hedge my bets? There's all those different conversations. But in order to do all that, you need to kind of go through this stuff first and figure out how big of a school do I want to go to? Young men who go to Fairfield Prep, this is a smaller school, so it's always interesting to me when kids want to go to these large state universities that aren't in your state and across the country, and how do you navigate that when you're not from South Carolina or not from whatever the state might be? So think about the geographic location, urban setting, visit anything. I had a sophomore in my office today. I said, go look at Sacred Heart. Go look at Fairfield U first. They have great nursing programs. If that's what you want to study, tell me what you like about those schools, and let's replicate that farther away if you want to. We don't have to spend money on, never mind, go on. Anyway, so you get my point. What's the academic focus? What do you want to major in? Those are things, we can talk about. And for some kids, I wouldn't say, About 80% of the kids who come through the office probably don't know what they want to study exactly. They have a general sense, and that's okay not to know. My personal philosophy is that it's something you kind of discover when you're in college. Anyway, back to some of this stuff. The facilities, these are all things that kids find or students find important. Research opportunities, the social atmosphere. They want fraternities, sororities. What are they looking for? They want big, yay, rah, rah. Do they want smaller and intimate? Do they want to be the athlete as opposed to watching athletes? You know what I'm saying? The cost, financial aid. What is important to you and your family? And you kind of, the list, it kind of gets determined based off of that. Housing, guaranteed for 4 years. I know Mr. Hutchinson's son said when he went off to school, he didn't want to think about where I was going to live. It's going to be on campus. I don't want to have to be searching for housing and finding roommates and people to go room with if I go to a larger state university like Virginia Tech or whatever it might be. So what's the diversity, the admissions criteria? Those are all things your son should be thinking about, and those are conversations that are happening now in our offices. Some families will come in my office and I'll give 1 or 2 schools and say, hey, just focus on these 1 or 2 right now. Go research these, come back and tell me what you think, and we'll add more. And then sometimes we start big and we kind of whittle it down. So everyone is different. All of us have our own different approaches to all this. But whenever kids do come in our offices, all the stuff that we talk about all ends up in the Naviance Colleges I'm Thinking About list. If you don't have access to this, reach out to your son's counselor. We'll give you guys access as soon as possible so you can see what we've been talking about and discussing. And these are just general categories that we often see in Naviance, whether it's far reach, possible, likely, safety. I liked having lots of options when kids get into schools. I don't like just having one. That's just my own personal preference, but some families will go a little bit more riskier. That's usually not my style, but to each his own. As long as you truly like the school that you're most likely to gain acceptance to, the quote-unquote safety, as long as you love it, I don't have a problem with it, as well as afford it as well. That is also important. In the end, on average, Fairfield Prep students apply to, on average 8 plus or minus a few schools. I'll have kids applying to, I think I had one student apply to like 30 schools this year, not sure why, but I have other schools, other handful of guys apply to 1. I have a lot of kids just applying to 1. So everyone is different, but do your homework, do your research, and that's what your son should be doing right now is cultivating that list, talking with your sons, and they should be talking with us. And as I said earlier, a safety school is only useful if you actually want to go there. And as Corry said, that engagement, that demonstrated interest, I think I sent all parents on my alphabet an email before Christmas saying, hey, now's your time to do your virtual tours over Christmas after, Christmas presents are open on, the 27th, 28th, do some research. Do it online, and then it's time to actually get the boots on the ground basically this past weekend now that colleges are back up and running. So, and campus visits.
Hi, I think I heard somebody when we came in here saying, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe we're here either, because I came in with your boys, and I would deny this, but they're very special to me. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're my favorite, but they might be my favorite. So this is really, this is exciting for me too, because I just love your boys so much. So the campus visit, Corry talked a little bit about this as well. And I just want to step aside. I know this is all really overwhelming, and we should all take a deep breath, because you're going to get through it. The best part about all of this is we know all of this stuff, so we're just a phone call away. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't have to know and be an expert on all of this right now, because that's what we do. So just trust the process in that. Okay, so campus visits. Pete just mentioned, doing virtual visits might be a really great way to first start. During COVID, they really made them very, very available. There's Zoom visits. You're able to go into some schools and find, specific major Zoom visits where you can go back and forth and ask questions. A really good way to get a feel for a school. The campus, the campus tours, and open houses that schools make available. You should register. You do that all on their websites. They make it very easy. Information sessions, again, you must register for those. Sometimes, again, there's days that it might be for engineering people or nursing or people interested in architecture or engineering. You can take a look and see what's available at each of those schools. In the fall, more so, I think, for seniors, there'll be open house events to go take a look. If an interview is available, that's something to do while you're on campus. Stop into the admissions office. If you're having conversations about athletics, of course, see if you can see a coach, talk to an athletic director when you're on campus. And it's always great if you know somebody or, come to us and ask, is there a prep student who goes to the school? I'd really love to maybe walk around with them for a day. Sometimes we can arrange overnights, but there could be nothing better than to see what it's like overnight, just student to student when there's no adults around. What does it feel like to be on this campus? Highly recommend. And, it's great. We have a lot of boys at a lot of schools. So, definitely use us to reach out because people love their schools and want people to come to them. Definitely spend time on the websites. It's such a great resource. Do your homework before you go to visit. This is the kind of things what we're saying to the boys. Think about questions. Sometimes I say do test tours. Go to a school where you're not, you may not know. We recently, with my son who's in the process as well, I'm having a hard time kind of getting him to move forward with the process. Very different from my daughter, make some decisions and get involved. So we said, well, let's take you to a small school and let's take you to a big school. So my husband took him to UConn and to Trinity up in Hartford one day and just said, what do you think? What are your thoughts? He hadn't even really mentioned them. I thought he was going to really like Trinity and he loved UConn. So now we're kind of thinking about some bigger schools and schools that are a little bit more rural because those are the things that he said that he liked. Another thing to remember is when you plan these visits, you may have these great expectations that your boys are going to be like, oh, I love all these schools because I've done my research, I've gone on the internet, it seems like the perfect fit. It's not a bad thing if they get back in the car on the ride home and they were like, I don't see myself there. Right? Sometimes that's more important. I did that with my daughter, spent all of spring break, junior year, touring schools, got in the car, the ride home. Well, what'd you think? What's your list? Put it in order. And she's like, I don't want to go to any of those schools. But that gave me a lot of information. She didn't want to be in a rural school. She didn't want to be in a tiny school, right? But it was really good information as we whittled down her list. So don't be discouraged if it's, I really didn't like this school or this, but do dig a little bit deeper and talk about why. What did you like? What did you not like? Best case scenario, they love it, right? They find their people, they think it's great. They're comfortable. I would say, make sure that you register, that engagement piece is so important. Make sure you do register. If, let's say you're on vacation sometime and you're going and you're like, oh, let's just swing off and go see this school. Make sure you stop by the admissions office, let them know that you were there, maybe follow up and say, I wasn't able to get a formal tour, but I visited, I really like this, I have some questions about that. The boys can follow up with emails, we can help them with that as well. So definitely, try to make sure that engagement piece is there. Okay, we kind of went through all of this. Visits help you refine your list, which is so important, demonstrates and helps you determine your own interests. Again, start to get them on campus if you can, because it might inspire them to maybe move forward a little bit, make some more decisions. It might excite them, right? Sometimes the dining halls, a lot of times the athletic facilities are like, whoa, and then it starts to get them wanting to see other things. Prioritize factors which help determine the right fit. Could it be urban? Could it be, that for my daughter was like, no way rural, my son is all rural, right? So that was a thing that helped a lot for that. Size is really important. And that starts to help you whittle down how you're going to do your other tours and what schools you want to see. Again, if a school is far away, use the internet. You can show your engagement that way and really dig into what a lot of the schools are offering on the internet in terms of specific programs. Try to get into webinars or information center with specific schools at some of the bigger universities. Okay, some things to look for when you're on campus. One thing I'm going to suggest too as a parent is it's going to be really, really hard to not ask questions and let your sons ask the questions on the tours. I'm going to recommend trying to be quiet and let them do that. It might be hard and you might find yourself whispering questions to them to ask the questions. But kind of watch your son. Watch how they feel on campus. Look at the residence halls. When you go to the residence halls, they tend to show you the really nice one. So pull your tour guide aside and say, is this a really nice one? Like, where did you live, right? That's always something that I ask. Look at dining options, parking, student center, what the chapel's like. The chapels at these schools are beautiful. What kinds of clubs and organizations, who can be in clubs and organizations, what, if your son wants to play a sport, are there club opportunities? What does that mean for a club? Like, is it accessible to everybody? Are there arts? Is there activities? Are there parties on campus? And then, of course, the academics. What size are your classes? Who teaches them? What courses are offered? How much access maybe that you have to research, internships, what the Career Center offers are all really good questions to ask. And kind of prep, the car ride up to campus, say like, oh, what are some of the questions that you want to ask? Because a lot of it is just practice. And the more questions they're able to come up with and the more they experience it, the more questions they'll have, hopefully. Okay, some useful websites, collegeboard.com, that's the SAT, that's where you'll register for the SAT, but they also have a lot of career inventories. There's a lot of information on College Board. If all of your sons have College Board accounts, do not let them create a second College Board account. If they can't get into their College Board, you're going to have to call College Board and get it. Do not let them create a second one. Connections Naviance, that's your access to Naviance and your separate access from your sons. We can see that you're adding schools, which is okay to do, but because it'll say student added it, counselor added it, or parent added it. Again, if you don't have that link, get in touch with one of us and we'll send you off the link and the password to your Naviance account. Commonapp.org, your son will create that with them this spring. They should only have one Common App .org account. The FAFSA, if you don't have to go on it right now, don't go on it right now. Give it some time to breathe. But there is a lot of information. There's some videos about the FAFSA. If it's your first time around, that hopefully it'll be up and earlier and running a little bit more smoothly next year. ACT.org is if you want to take the ACT, and NCAA.org is if you have an athlete, especially one who's interested in playing D1 or D2. There's a clearinghouse that they need to register for on the NCAA website. Okay, moving forward, just a couple of things to stick in your head and remember for later. In August, we're going to have a Common Application Boot Camp. We had it last year. We had a drop-in. Boys came, and we just started to kind of clean up the Common App a little bit. It was before school started. It was in the morning. We were all there helping them out. It was great. Make sure that your boys continue to come and see us. I think our junior class is pretty good at that, but the more is better. Again, we're writing their recommendations. We want to be able to help them. We want to be able to guide them in the right direction. Create a testing plan. It is a good idea to have a good test, have a test under their belts, and then make a decision. They've heard that a million times from us. Make sure that they have enough time to write their essay, because there's more and more schools have supplemental writing. So you've got that one big essay that they're going to write. There's like 650 words for the Common App, and then schools have supplemental essays. So you don't want to be like, oh, I have my essay done, I'm done. And so you wait until the last minute to submit your application, and then suddenly you have like 5 essays to write. And there are schools that have 5 or more. So that's all in the Common App and just doing a little bit of research. So it's about timing, right? Giving ourselves time. Just to discern, right? What do I want to do? What is my plan? And using us to make those decisions, because we're here to help guide you. Okay, John, do you want me to go through this? Okay, thanks, guys.
All right, so I think you've heard this a whole lot of times tonight that we're here to help, and we want you to reach out. And I think what we've put here, the following checklists are really for you and not necessarily for us to go through piece by piece. So this will be sent out. Again, maybe 1 or 2 things are worth looking at on April 30th. It's actually April 30th, I'm sorry, not the 25th. At 4:30, we'll have a bounce back college fair here in Bridgeport. Certainly a good opportunity. Once again, we've talked about engagement, and a lot of the schools that are there are about 200 colleges will be there, and the representatives they send are often the representatives who will be reading your son's application, and they'll be back here in the fall if they're visiting, so you keep an eye on that. That would be important. Again, we are going to be walking through with your sons the teacher rec requests procedures, and they'll have that all done before they leave for summer. Yeah, they'll have to activate those in the fall, but again, that's important. I mentioned earlier the brag sheet. Yeah, we want a brag sheet from all of your sons, and so we'll have that out there. There'll be a brag sheet for parents too. Last line on this slide, parent brag sheet. So we'll be sending that out to you. Again, we give you a chance to tell us a few things about your son that we might not know, and oftentimes, that strengthens our recommendation. Corry mentioned earlier that the counselor recommendation is an important piece here. And it's important for us to do as the best possible job in recommending your son to college. Again, these things we've already talked about, so I'll leave those. They're checklists. And a fall of senior year. The only thing I wanted to mention here is once again reiterate that we'll have about 150 plus college representatives visiting Fairfield Prep. Your sons will be able to sign up for those visits in Naviance. We give student release time from class. Yeah, they have to use that judiciously, but that's just another layer of engagement. All right, so again, we've put a lot of things in front of you this evening, and we're happy that you're here, and those people who are coming in from home, zooming in on the stream. Corry's here to answer some questions. We're also here to answer questions, but let's start maybe with questions you have for Corry, and thanks again for being here. Corry.
Yes.
But the other one has, something I'm going to say is, not suggesting they lie, but is it better to take something than open to grow, like business?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't think it will ever come down to that question, whether or not the student gets in, but being able to have the nuance of, these are things that I'm interested in, I think I like, but versus saying, I don't know. The kid who comes in just shakes their head at that question and can't say, a couple things that they are interested in. Sometimes it's a little bit of a red flag, but if that student comes in, the most common interview question I ask is, what are some of the jobs that you're interested in? It's business. And then I'll say, well, what do you mean by that? Or is there a family member that has a job that you're interested in that you've seen? And then it goes into a conversation. Other times it's like, I don't know, I just want to, during the COVID, I like, picking stocks on Robinhood. It's trying to get out of them a little bit what they think those jobs or those careers mean. But for the kid who truly doesn't know, you can have great kids that say, I don't know, I'm really interested in humanities, or I'm really interested in English. I love writing, I love history, I love X, and that's great too. Yep. So it's a great question. So there are a lot of schools, and I've been on panels with fellow admission folks who say, we don't take demonstrated interest into account. There are a handful of schools who truly don't. But I would say, in my frame of reference is at selective private Catholic, not necessarily Jesuit, but Catholic private schools, almost all will use some form of demonstrated interest. Whether they are brave enough to say that publicly, it kind of depends on who's up there. But almost all schools will use it. There's exceptions. I'm sure John and his team could tell you a handful of schools where they just don't, for whatever reason, that doesn't factor in. But a Fairfield, like the schools that were mentioned earlier, they're all using it. There is some level of understanding of that student. Sometimes it's a binary of yes or no. Sometimes it's visit or no visit. But the majority of schools, selective private places, are looking at that at some level.
So you talked a lot, the numbers kind of look towards early decision as where a lot of schools are taking students from 50% plus. Like when you look at the pool of applicants for that, how many
Yeah, it depends. Each school is going to be a little bit different. So I think, there is a couple of schools I could tell you that fill 50% of their class ED. Like there's a Jesuit school that's small in New England that I won't mention that takes about half their kids through ED. And then there's some, NESCAC places that are filling most, half their classes that way. But I would say most schools are in that kind of 35-40% range for their ED population. For Division I places, an NLI, when you sign a national letter of intent, a lot of times that student would also be an early decision applicant, not exclusively, but a lot. For roster spot athletes, typically they're going D1, sometimes special talents that way. So I would say, it's going to vary, but there's a handful of spots that are definitely kind of spoken for by various special interests for that community. Typically we're seeing about 35-40% of a class at really selective places coming in ED.
So the other thing you mentioned too was, throughout this presentation, everybody was engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So if you apply early decision, right, your engagement really doesn't matter because you're obviously fully engaged with the school by applying that status. So when you look at that application, is there a ranking that might be more preferential? Is it much more based on grades at that point?
Yep. So I would say that for ED, you are showing your engagement by going ED. That is a way of showcasing it. There are red flags. There's sometimes I'll see an ED applicant to Fairfield, and the kid's never visited. I'm trying to figure out what's that story behind that. Like, did that student mean to go early decision? Were they supposed to be EA? So sometimes it can set a red flag. So definitely you'd want to make sure you have a visit on record with those schools. And then as far as what goes into that review, each school is going to be a little bit different, but I think how it was explained earlier is the school will be more willing to take a chance on admitting a student ED if they had a blip on their transcript versus going into the more general EA or regular decision pool. So that ED can be a helpful tool for someone. And so I always give an example at Fairfield. If a student wants nursing, we had 1,800 applications for 175 spots. Those students, if they want to be a nurse and they want ED, is the way to go because 115, 120 of those spots will be filled by ED students. Now, as an early action student, you're up against a huge pool of students. So you really then the academics is going to really trump everything else at that point. So use that decision plan to the best of that student's ability. Really selective programs, like for us in the Dolan School, like finance is really selective. We would use it there. In certain schools, same thing. If you're looking at Fordham and you want Gabelli finance, it's going, and ED could be an option. That may be a right fit for that student.
For the schools that are test required or test optional,
Mm-hmm.
is there any preference ACT versus SAT?
No, we look at them the same. Yep. It's really sometimes for some students, just the way that the math works on these exams. If math is the weakest subject for your son, the ACT minimizes that exposure by a quarter of the percent because now it's a quarter of the score rather than half of the score. Yes. Yeah, I'd rather turn that one over to.
I saw South Carolina.
Yeah, so I think Fairfield was up there in the top 5, certainly last year. Fordham. Oh yeah. Okay, let me move over a little bit. So Fairfield was there. Fordham is often there. Boston College, but that's not every year necessarily. UConn is always in that strong group. We've seen a sort of a flock of applications heading down to South Carolina, but again, some of these schools have become much more competitive. TCU, South Carolina, some of the southern schools, Georgia, are very, very, very competitive now, big national names. But if there's a top 5, it's Fairfield, Fordham, BC, Villanova has been one of the top 5, UConn. What am I missing here? Loyola, Maryland, depending on the year. Providence, I'm sorry, yes, absolutely Providence. So those are the schools. Now, again, Pete talked about this. When you're searching for colleges, make it a search. Don't search for what you know is out there. And so, we always enjoy it when students come in saying, hey, this is a school I'm looking at, and it's one that really isn't, one of our students is at Grinnell. It's an extraordinary school, and he was here to visit recently. He's having an unbelievably rich experience there. So, maybe sometimes the school you have never heard about and nobody's going to is the school that might be the better one for you. So, we don't tell students where to apply and where not to apply, but we encourage a genuine search. So again, we all know the top 5 or the top 10. And in fact, we put out, I think, on our public media today, the list of schools where our current senior class has been accepted on an early basis, either action, decision, or on a rolling basis. So that went out in the media today. Again, what I like about that list, I don't know where students will end up, is there are a lot of schools on there, and they're broad, and they're near, and they're far, and they're large, and they're small. So in many ways, when you craft your list of colleges you're applying to create options. Other than those that are applying early decision to one school getting in and being done, you're applying to create options. And so is a student different in the fall when he applies than in the spring when he decides? I think the answer is absolutely yes. So, keep those options open is really important. Anyway, I went off the path on that one a little bit. So if there are no other questions at this point, or if there are, we're going to be around for a few minutes. But really, thank you very much for being here and for your attention, honestly. And know that we're here to help. All right, we're here to help. Don't hesitate to reach out. You're welcome. Yes.
Hey, how are you? We haven't had a meeting. Yeah, he's up at